It is inevitable that all towns and cities will develop and change over time. With growth and expansion, the true test of any community is how it treats its history. In the late 1960s, Olathe, Kansas faced this test, and now over 50 years later, it is clear that it missed the mark. Founded in 1857, Olathe, Kansas was an agricultural community separate from the nearby Kansas City metropolitan area. For decades, Olathe would maintain a population of roughly 3,000 and cater its life around local farms. By the mid-20th century, the world was changing, and its influence began to transform the face of Olathe. In 1961, I-35 had come south out of Kansas City and reached Olathe, and soon I-435 would be open. For the first time, Olathe residents had 4-lane high-speed automobile access to other parts of Johnson County and the Kansas City metropolitan area. Overland Park was a much younger city than Olathe, but exploding with economic growth. Overland Park had none of the profound history and character of Olathe, but as it moved closer and access was easier, more and more Olathe citizens were spending their money there. A marketing study done at the time showed that while Olathe residents spent around $6 million in their hometown, they were now shelling out close to $20 million elsewhere in the metro area. Downtown Olathe had older brick buildings, and as other communities like Overland Park built large shopping malls and new modern design buildings, Olathe became less attractive. The temptation became too much, and Olathe found itself looking for a way to bring shoppers back. Years before, President Truman signed into law the 1949 Housing Act. This would provide federal funds for communities to rebuild and develop their aging infrastructure. The program would become known as Urban Renewal. Local business owners lobbied the city council to seek these federal funds, and in 1965, Olathe established an Urban Renewal agency. The program began in earnest later that year, with the goal of revitalizing downtown Olathe. 102 buildings were slated for destruction and removal. In 1967 and 1968, Olathe began demolition that would destroy many historic landmarks and remove forever the charm of downtown. Although urban renewal was popular with some citizens, there were others that angrily called it urban removal. In its zeal to play catch-up, Olathe leadership had given little thought to the preservation of its history. Most of the city's historic structures would be destroyed. The Olathe Hotel was built in 1863 and survived for over 100 years. The building started as a general store, and later a story was added, and it became a hotel. Richard Hickok and Perry Smith, the two infamous criminals who murdered the Clutter family in 1959, stayed at the hotel just prior to the murders. A book and film were made of the crime, and parts of the movie, In Cold Blood, was filmed in downtown Olathe in 1966. The historic Olathe Hotel and the entire strip of buildings along Santa Fe were razed during urban renewal in 1968. Olathe's new city hall was built on the block. In 2020, the county razed the city hall building and built a new courthouse. The Hire Boot Company moved into the building on the northwest corner of Park and Chestnut in 1904. In 1914, Hire expanded into the old hotel on Chestnut behind their building on Park Street. This stone structure was built in 1859 or 1860 by Colonel Hayes as a hotel. It was used to house the militia during the Civil War. Hire Boot Company moved to a new facility in 1964, on the east side of Olathe near I-35. The Urban Renewal Agency purchased both of the old higher buildings and tore them down. A new shopping area known as the Colonnade was built on the corner, and the stone building built by Colonel Hayes was turned into a parking lot. The half block of buildings on Cherry at the corner of Santa Fe also fell. This included the Andrews Theater, a beautiful brick building where, for decades, many Olathe residents went to the movies. Soon after, a sterile 3-story law office was built. In 2021, this building sits empty, waiting for a tenant. Urban Renewal also removed entire blocks from downtown. The northeast and southeast corners of Park and Chestnut were completely leveled. These two sections were razed and laid empty for nearly a decade until a new library was built in 1979 and a new post office in 1981. The North Block lost the Carnegie Library building built in 1914 and the Olathe Masonic Lodge, which was also built in 1914. Numerous other structures fell as the once historic downtown buildings were replaced by parking lots or sterile utilitarian structures. The south side of the square along Park Street was spared from demolition during urban renewal and slated to get a facelift as a mall promenade with a water fountain. In 1990, the block of buildings on the south side of the square that had survived urban renewal were razed to make room for the new Johnson County Administration building that was completed in 1992. This row of buildings included the original Johnson County Courthouse building dating to 1857. It sat on the southeast corner of Park and Kansas. The west block of Kansas Avenue between Park and Santa Fe fell in the early 1970s. On the corner of this block was a beautiful Spanish tile and brick building that served as Olathe City Hall and fire station for many decades. After the buildings were destroyed, this corner remained a parking lot for nearly 2 decades until Johnson County built a new jail on the site in 1989. The second phase of urban renewal was focused on the residential section just northwest of town called the Fairview neighborhood. This area was mostly African American and poor. Within the 12-block area, 59 parcels had been purchased and 57 structures had been targeted to be destroyed. These residents were offered fair market value for their homes plus $5,000 to either rebuild or find a decent, safe, and sanitary dwelling of modest standards. Fairview also benefited from a new park and sidewalks. One of Urban Renewal's successes was to help this neighborhood and its African American residents who had long been neglected. After the federal government support ended in 1974, Olathe's Urban Renewal Agency closed its doors. In the span of 9 years, the Urban Renewal Agency left a path of destruction, and Olathe has never recovered. Something happened in the late 1960s that changed Olathe. Urban renewal was the outer result of the community's desire. Olathe wanted to be something new. It wanted to be something it was not. Olathe could have maintained its character and been a historic town that the metropolitan area absorbed, but the opposite happened. In its desperation for economic gain, it tried to compete with its much larger and younger brother, Overland Park, and has lived in its shadow ever since. Olathe, through urban renewal, destroyed a part of itself. Known often as the City Beautiful, Olathe lost that title and still to this day has yet to reclaim it.